Trump is going to be the next president, all things going to plan. Hopefully there's going to be no more bullets going his way. Who knows what's going to happen, but it's looking pretty likely, I think, that he is going to be the next president. And I thought it'd be useful to go over what he's actually going to do while he's in office, because he said a lot of things, and also I think it'd be worthwhile talking about the likelihood of him actually achieving those things. And I'm going to try and be as comprehensive as possible, but obviously I'm limited by a time limit, so there will be stuff that we might miss out that you'll think is important, but that is why you should comment about it in the comment section and not have a go at us and be nice, because we're limited by the amount of time we have. But it is also worth mentioning, I've wrote a pretty comprehensive article about this, as well as the fact that we're going to be covering this at 4 o'clock on the website. We're going to be watching the inauguration live. I think it's going to be a star-studded panel of ourselves, Carl and Dan, and maybe Harry. I don't know who's going to be on it yet, but we're going to be watching live. If you wanted to come and join us doing so.
That'll be a long multi-hour stream where it's just relaxed, like a lad's hour.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a couple of drinks.
Exactly. Sort of like a watch party, except online, and we're not providing you with free alcohol. Sorry about that. But one thing I wanted to draw a lot of attention to is that Donald Trump has basically announced that he's going to sign close to 100 executive orders as he's and this is going to be on his first day. That's what he said, at least. Whether that happens or not is a different thing. But I think that's very interesting, because Biden, in his first week, signed 17, and this was seen as like an unprecedented move towards more dictatorial use of presidential powers. And 17 in the first week was the equivalent of 2 months of Trump's previous presidency. And so this is a massive ramping up of the use of executive orders. If you're not familiar with what an executive order is, it's basically a president's way of signing something into law without having to go via Congress, although Congress can override it, I think, off the top of my head, with a 2/3 majority. Is that right?
I'm not totally sure, but I think Trump sort of broke the seal on these in his first term, because it was hard for him to get things done. A lot of people in his own party were stymieing him as well, and obviously the whole apparatus of the American public sector, their equivalent of the civil service, was stymieing him as well. So to make things happen, he started using them, and then like Joe Biden started using them more, and now Trump's come back and he's like, yeah, let's have 1 million of them, come on.
I do think that the founding fathers will be turning in their grave at this. Someone like John Adams or Benjamin Franklin or someone would be upset if they saw this, because it's now a tit for tat thing. You sort of going forward, I feel like every time there's a change of party, change of presidential, it will just be this. They'll do 100, 200, 500 in decades to come. On day one, it's just de rigueur that you do 500 executive orders. I feel like that's the way it's going to go. There is a parallel there with the end of the Roman Republic, because it isn't illegal, right? There's not actually
it's sort of convention to do very few of them, similar to presidential pardons, isn't it?
They've
right.
Traditionally just been used in wartime, or times where something needs to happen very quickly and it's an emergency. But then, I mean, I guess a lot of people would argue that after, we've had decades essentially of this sort of, left-wing big state government that's gradually got more progressive, more lefty and bigger and more cumbersome, that Trump, to actually make any changes in just 4 years, he has to hit the ground running. And this is an emergency. He has to sign, I mean, the emergency closing of the border and things like that, it kind of has to be done. You can't just put legislation into play that's going to possibly come into action in 18 months time.
Yeah, I think just like presidential pardons, you can see the progression over the centuries, where it used to be quite a limited thing and now it's hundreds or even a few thousand. Again, I think the founding fathers, it's not really what they intended.
Yeah.
But like the Roman Republic, you'll see people not doing things that are, strictly speaking by the letter of the law, illegal, but just absolutely taking the mickey out of what was meant by it.
Yeah. But then I guess it's a different world. Like the founding fathers, America was a much more homogenous, high trust society. So it's like our asylum system rules in the UK. They're designed, in the sort of post-war era, when we weren't expecting thousands of Somalians or Libyans or whoever to exploit the rules to come here.
Well, they didn't have the technology to get here in the first place,
and they didn't have TikToks. They couldn't see Britain. They couldn't see social media accounts telling them what to do, what lawyers to hire, and all the rest of it.
Yeah, or the Welsh Council advertising young girls to.
Oh my God!
What was that?
But
What was that?
I'm a bit more optimistic about Trump's use of executive orders here, because I think that there are multiple things that could be done. First of all, I think that it's clear that he's very serious about getting his agenda sorted. And for better or worse, I think worse, he's going to restore some faith in the American political system by going in and actually doing things that he said he would do. There was an election where he clearly won, and he's going to go in and do a bunch of things that he said he will do.
And there are things that people want as well. I mean, I think the mistake that left-wing parties like the Democrats and Labour do is, they get this mandate to govern, and then they do things that the people don't want, which isn't really, even though they've been democratically elected, it's not democracy if you're doing things that people don't want.
Mm-hmm. Very much so, yeah. And lots of conversation has been had in the media. Like loads of articles from a plethora of different outlets have been talking about what he's actually going to do with these 100 executive orders. And I think the main point of concern in my mind is that of immigration, and particularly things like deportations. And obviously Trump has vowed, and I'm quoting directly here, to launch the largest deportation program in American history, starting from day one. And that seems to signal to me that he's going to pass some sort of executive order making it happen, which I'm very interested to see, because if America starts this, then and it's successful, then also that's going to have an impact across the world, because it sets the acceptable parameters for policy, say in Europe and elsewhere. Lots of places that are experiencing mass migration, and there might be a sort of domino effect from this. And of course I want Americans to do this just for their own benefit, because they shouldn't have to suffer people breaking into their country and them having to pay for it. Is a massive injustice.
The Tories and Labour have both used the excuse of these are just the rules we have to work with. We have to let all the hundreds of illegal immigrants come in every day because there's nothing we can do. And it's no, you could pass emergency laws. How come during COVID there's this highly survivable virus and we managed to completely close the borders to stop that? And now we've got some slightly less survivable jihadis who want to get into the country, and there's nothing we can do. The rules won't let us.
I particularly hate that argument that they use. Oh, there's nothing we can do. Our hands are tied. When everyone from David Starkey to Matt Goodwin has said, no, you can do this, and this. You can be an actual government, an actual lead, but they just refuse to. One note of caution I would say about Trump getting in and doing all this stuff on day one. I mean, obviously, I am, at least to a limited degree, a Trump partisan. But a note of caution is, first time round, he did say stuff and then just simply didn't do it, blocking up Hillary or something.
I think there's...
He did, didn't he? I think basically, I'm going to... And then just on this first day in a press conference going, no, I'm not doing that.
I think some of it is going to be rhetoric, just sort of egging up his own base, but some things are serious, and I think that this is one of them. And supposedly he's expected to declare a national border emergency and order the military to help as well.
Nice.
There we go.
Nice.
Bo's going to have a sequence of hats under that table that he's going to work throughout the whole segment. But yeah, I think this is important. I think that it needs to be done, and it needs to be done quickly and with a lot of authority, because there is no excuse for people to break into the United States. I mean, you look at countries as well. There are lots of talk about things like human rights. Well, how does Saudi Arabia get to shoot hundreds of people at their border, and you never hear people stand up and say, oh, well, have you thought about the human rights? Because they know it's a lost cause. And I think that when people smell weakness and they smell an opportunity, they're going to try and take it. And so you've got to be tough on these things and give the perception that you're unwavering. And
the border system they had under the Democrats, and pretty much over the last few decades, is a kind of anti-civilizational border policy. It sort of rewards people who don't follow the rules. I'd love to go and live in America. I'd love it. You know what I mean? I'm only in Britain because I can't do that. You know what I mean? The British dream is to be able to leave Britain and pursue the American dream. But I can't do that because I'm British, so I've got to, I'm just like I'm conditioned to form a queue, fill in a form, and all the rest of it. If I do that, I can't get in. You know what I mean? I'm not a tech guru. I don't get an H-1B visa or whatever. Whereas other people that aren't from sort of civilized cultures, anybody who wants to can just rock up and go over the border. I don't know. Maybe Scottish people are doing it as well. Have you seen any Scottish people coming over the border?
I don't know. Maybe worth a shot.
So it's like the system like sort of rewards and incentivizes the wrong kind of immigration.
Well, wasn't it that 4% of Haiti's population is now in the United States?
Yeah.
Which is just absurd, and that's a population of people, that you wouldn't
Dominican
want.
Republic has been way more successful in expelling hundreds of thousands of Haitians from its land, because obviously it's half of the same island. And if you look at we've got a problem with Pakistani Muslim rape gangs in the UK. We're like, oh, there's nothing we can do. Oh, we've got to let them rape those kids because we can't deport them. We can't all the rest of it. In Afghanistan, actually Pakistan's expelled 1.5 million Afghanis. So other countries have no problem at all enforcing borders. Expelling people who they don't want. Treating demographic groups like that. So. I mean, I don't know why the West can't.
There are plenty of examples, both in recent times and historically, of countries expelling on a mass scale people. So it can be done. There is lots and lots of precedent for it. I mean, Russia recently got rid of loads of people. Just look at the partition.
Got rid of loads of Russians as well.
Yeah. So if you've got a government with the political will and the balls to do it, and the political capital, you would need probably a decent majority in the House and etc.
Well, but Congress is Republican, isn't it?
Can be done. All right, yeah, I was thinking of our House of Commons. But yeah, Trump's got, he hasn't got 2/3 in Congress, but nonetheless, he's got the majority in Congress and Senate and the Supreme Court behind him. Mm-hmm. So if he's got this window of 2 years where if stuff like this is going to honestly really get done, then he's got like 2 years and absolutely have to hit the ground running. It's an old cliche, isn't it? The first 100 days...
Yeah,
they always say what you do or don't get done in the first 100 days sets the tone, or more than sets the tone. It sort of sets you up for what you're able to do, really.
Yeah, and we're seeing a real shift in the mood of the American people and people across the West. So, listening to AOC and other people talk about Trump, it's like, oh, he's fascist, he's coming and he's doing all this stuff that people don't want. If you actually look at what the opinion polls are saying, Trump's approval ratings continue to improve as people find out what he's doing and about these executive orders. So people actually really like these ideas in aggregate. And if you look at Biden, his approval ratings have continued to fall, even though he's not even going to be president anymore. You know what I mean? In fact, they did a survey and most Americans can't remember a single thing Biden did. I mean, to be fair, neither can Biden.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing that sticks out in my mind is our failures. Things like pulling out of Afghanistan disastrously or something like that.
Yeah. Which led to, Ukraine and everything. That's the sign of American weakness.
Let me fire through some of the things that Trump intends to do to sort out the border then, because other than declaring the national emergency and getting the military onto it, he also said potentially that he would end the policy that kept federal immigration authorities from conducting raids on churches and schools, being a safe haven. He's going to re-implement his Remain in Mexico policy and probably expand it, I would imagine. He wants to end birthright citizenship, which is potentially a contentious one because in the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, it is written as such: all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the states wherein they reside. And so there's not really much wiggle room in that wording.
You can't repeal an amendment.
That is true. If he repeals the 14th, that would be kind of hilarious, wouldn't it? But the Supreme Court does lean right, and they would ultimately be the ones that would adjudicate that decision. And the Supreme Court can sometimes be funny because they do take a certain amount of pride in their independence, and they don't just exclusively rule on partisan lines. But I could imagine there's some degree of favourability to it amongst them, and so it's possible. Also, he's mentioned about closing the border on health grounds. So there's a 1944 measure called Title 42, which allows the US government to curb migration to protect public health, which is funny framing, actually, because it's kind of true that migrants do bring lots of crime, which is bad for your health, as well as large movements of people is not just a stereotype, do often bring lots of diseases that you wouldn't otherwise get.
Well, yeah, it was one of the justifications given by the government for migrants in this country, illegal migrants in this country, getting free private health care from the government, while British citizens who've paid into the system have to wait years for their operations. And they said, well, people coming into the country can have diseases such as tuberculosis and stuff. So you want to treat these quickly before they get out into the general population. It's like, man, I'm not sure I want to treat them quickly. I'd rather just, if people are bringing tuberculosis, maybe we've got enough tuberculosis already in the UK. Maybe we don't need any more.
Yeah, my desired amount of tuberculosis is 0, funnily enough.
Yeah.
Or diseases that have essentially been eradicated in the West.
Rabies
and then
is going to
they bring
have a
them back.
resurgence, yeah.
Yeah.
Horrible.
Crazy situation.
But two other things is that he's going to classify potentially the drug cartels as a foreign terrorist organisation, which may expand his ability to deal with them, and also, of course, finish the border wall because it's still not completely constructed. And then I'm going to move on to sort of trade and the economy. Obviously, a big deal has been made about his tariffs, and this is heavily inspired by the 25th president, William McKinley, who, Bo, you've got a bit of trivia about him. There's a sort of similarity between...
He was assassinated, wasn't he? He was one of the assassination guys.
Right. And Trump
There's
has...
been 4, haven't there? But
Yeah. Trump has obviously survived assassination attempts, so yeah, bit of prophecy there. So I've seen multiple different accounts here of whether it's going to be a 10% or 20% tariff on all imports, 25% on Canadian and Mexican goods, and then 60% on all things coming from China, which would obviously be massive. And he's going to sort of get them when they're vulnerable. Although a lot has been said about the fact that these are not necessarily serious tariffs that he's going to go with, and they're negotiable. He's just going in with something quite severe to then negotiate a better deal, which sounds like something Trump would do, although basing things off of import tariffs is good if you want to protect domestic industries, things like that. You want to protect jobs. A lot of the Rust Belt who voted for Trump approve of this sort of thing because it keeps jobs in America that they do. And you can make an argument for that in that it grows domestic industry.
The flip side of that is it pushes up costs.
It does indeed,
for the consumer in America. I don't know if they'd appreciate that, and it makes the entire global economy less efficient in aggregate. If everybody's having to design and build their own flat screen televisions instead of just getting the Korean ones where they've perfected it. It's like Scotland's perfected shortbread. Why would you try and make your own shortbread industry?
That's a good point. Mm-hmm. I just like the whole thing that it's a rebalancing of power. It's an exercising that as well, right? Mm-hmm. Just telling the Chinese or whoever that, no, we, the American government, are just not a complete pushover. Yeah. No, we're not going to let you just steamroller us forever.
Yeah.
Whether he actually puts in 60% or not, it's just sends a signal.
Yeah, and also China uses a lot of its industry. The state subsidizes the industry, and it's a sort of strategic weapon. If you look at what they've done with the solar industry, solar is going to be huge for the world. Germany used to be a world leader in solar power, and China's just subsidized it. So now it's pushed all the German producers out of business, and China is now producing almost all of the world's solar panels. So if you've got a strategic industry like steel, energy, anything like that, then malicious states can subsidize it and use it as a weapon.
Yeah, you want any industry that is important to national security under your jurisdiction, really, don't you? Because things like agriculture, energy production, arms manufacturing, you want on your own home soil for obvious reasons, right? And things like steel production, which is something that Trump put tariffs on China originally because he had tariffs, but they were much more targeted and specific in his previous term. I think it was aluminium or aluminum, if I must. And steel, and I think things used in solar panels, actually, that his tariffs were on off the top of my head. And so by blanketly doing this, I think what he's doing is signalling, I want to negotiate, come to the table, we'll figure something out that's more beneficial to the US, hopefully.
And also, it's got the potential to raise a huge amount of revenue. So in the old days, states used to make so much money from tariffs, I guess because just the administrative burden of, levying income taxes and things, it wouldn't have been practicable in the 12th century or whatever. But right up until quite recently, tariffs generated a huge amount of money for the state, and that's been almost completely replaced with like income tax, VAT, stuff like that.
And this is what Trump's actually explicitly said, is that he likes tariffs because it means he can reduce taxes.
Yeah.
And as someone who absolutely hates taxes, I like the sound of that.
Yeah.
And I'm not importing many goods, so
But it's also
good for me.
It's also kind of it's almost like replacing income tax with VAT. Like tariffs are essentially a form of VAT because the price you pay for the product is going to go up. And also the thing I like about offshoring production means that, you know, the argument that big businesses make for open borders and mass immigration is like, oh, we need all the people, we need the entire population of the Mirpur Valley in Pakistan to come here to work in the factories. And it's like, if the stuff can get made in the factories there, then, you know, you can prevent the social conflict here.
That's true, yeah. I mean, I would rather still have domestic industry if possible, but some things don't need to be made here. Like, we don't need cheap plastic tap that China makes, made domestically.
Whereas it would be nice to have a steel industry of our own.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Especially
exactly.
if we go to war with China, and then they're like, oh, wait a minute, we're not going to sell you any steel to make any aircraft carriers, so you just lost the war.
Yeah, yeah.
Return to wooden ships again, perhaps.
I mean, I know that China have, I guess it must be for strategic reasons, have stockpiled loads and loads of steel, like the majority of all the steel in the world. I mean, China have had a thing about steel ever since the Maoist era, because one of Mao's giant promises, pledges, hopes, is that he could outproduce Britain, specifically Britain, in terms of steel. Well, they've now done that. They've now completed that many times over. So, yeah, should we find ourselves at war with China, it's already over.
Yeah.
It's a fait accompli, essentially. That's one of the things if I found myself King of England or Lord Protector or something, I would restart our steel industry.
Yeah.
Definitely, 100%. But
So yeah, it makes sense from America's perspective to do this because, of course, their main competitor is China now. Another thing that he's potentially going to do, it's been sort of bandied around, is maybe there'll be a federal Bitcoin stockpile, similar to, you know, how the state stockpiles gold.
I'm going to use Trump's meme coin. It's Trump coin. And also there's Smilenia has also been launched.
really?
I think
It's got
Trump,
a good ring to it, really, has
the
it?
thing is, the Trump meme coin, it crashed last night.
Oh, did it?
Yeah, after his speech and after Melania's meme coin was launched. So I don't know if Trump's doing a Hawk Tua style.
I was going to say, because I didn't know it crashed overnight. I heard it launched and went through the roof, but now it's crashed.
Now it's crashed.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
That was quick.
Who'd have thought? I'd have thought a Trump meme coin would be like a solid. Just get rid of all the gold in the Federal Reserve and
Give it to
replace
me.
with Smilenia.
I wonder what it will do to the Bitcoin price if Trump does announce or actually buy a massive stockpile of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
I wonder whether that will sort of devalue it on some level and so the price will dip, or whether that will boost confidence and so the price will spike.
I think the
I've got
confidence
no idea.
would be a determining factor, and also the fact that they're just going to buy a bunch, and the market would react by increasing the price. If there's
would
an
think
increase in
so.
demand, a massive bump, like a US government-style bump in demand would be significant enough to shift prices.
I mean, because Bitcoin, the nature of it is that there's a finite number of Bitcoin, so it's not the same as many other equities or commodities, right? But nonetheless, you would think what you just said would be true, but it might not. Markets, particularly crypto markets, do react in odd ways.
That's
often.
true,
But,
Yeah.
I mean, we'll see.
Another thing as well, he's promised to issue an executive order that would postpone a law banning the app TikTok, which is of course Chinese owned, and that would give them time to find a US partner to buy a 50% stake in the company, and then Trump feels that this would be sort of grounds where it would be okay for them to operate. So it's basically a way of the US making money off of threatening to ban TikTok.
Yeah,
really.
I couldn't believe the Democrats handed Trump this propaganda coup, like before he's even in power. So everything was set in place to ban TikTok because it's Chinese owned. Might actually be a good idea to ban it. You know, it's not like if you look
It's
at
very annoying. Yeah.
if you look at the equivalent of TikTok in China, if you look at Red Note or whatever, it's all just like, you know, maths and how to be a good citizen. If you look at TikTok, it's all like how to transition, you know, how to be a communist. It's all, you know, it's horrific. But the Democrats were gonna ban it, and so they handed Trump this coup where he can be like the savior of TikTok, and he stepped in, and millions of people use TikTok, and a lot of them probably aren't that politically engaged. So now they just know Trump as the savior of their favorite platform, and I don't know why the Democrats would snatch another defeat from the jaws of already quite a lot of defeats.
Yeah, the Dems, they're not good at 4D chess, 5D. They're just not good at it. They've got like this one ideological view of the world, and let's do something that moves towards that, and that's it. That's
Can't even do the 2D chess.
Yeah, they're like, don't worry, we're gonna pay Beyonce lots of money to sing. That'll fix everything.
That's the amount of contempt you've got to have to be like, yes, let's just pay celebrities to endorse us. That'll be enough. Let's not tangibly improve their lives in any way.
This is new to me. The idea that Trump would sort of do an aggressive takeover of TikTok.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea actually, because then it undermines the argument against Chinese influence, because at least there's a stakeholder that I imagine Trump would have to approve of, right, to then give it the go-ahead to not be banned. And so it's a way of the US making money and also them not having to ban something that's popular. So it's a win-win, which is quite clever. So on to climate and energy. He's going to scrap a lot of the green energy policies that Biden introduced, which is not a surprise to anyone. Obviously, he hates windmills, as he calls them. I hate them as well, mainly because they're aesthetic abominations. But
I quite like them because, like, if you're walking on the Scottish Highlands, it just looks cool. It looks like science fiction. It really does.
I've always thought that Scotland needs a bit more of a dystopian look about it, you know.
We've got enough dystopia in the cities, but this is like a nice, clean dystopia. This is, you know...
But do you not find that when you're looking at a lovely, beautiful landscape and you can just see this artificial man-made thing spinning?
No, I like artificial man-made stuff.
Lost cause.
You're worlds apart in your thinking, you two. Worlds apart.
So... he's obviously going to remove things like drilling restrictions. I think what has been listed is offshore and federal land for oil. So it looks like oil's back again. He's also going to pull out of the Paris Agreement again, the climate agreement, which he did after 6 months of assuming office last time. And there's no reason to think he wouldn't do it again, because Biden, I think in 2021, off the top of my head, went back into it, and obviously it's a waste of time. It expects America to solve the world's problems, and it isn't a good deal for them. It's very punitive to America, which doesn't really benefit from it. And also, you don't get energy innovation by pushing up the cost of innovating. That's madness.
Absolutely, and with all this red tape around innovating. And if you look at the left, I mean, there's so many signs that climate change isn't actually about the climate. It's about implementing some sort of one world communism. Because if you look at all the people who bang on about climate change, one of the main ways we can reduce our carbon footprint is to stop illegal immigration. If somebody's coming from Sierra Leone or the Congo or whatever, their carbon footprint increases 150 times when they come to the UK, because they start living a modern Western lifestyle with, you know, all the fun, energy-consuming stuff that entails. So you'd think, you know, Greta Thunberg and all these people would be like, yeah, we need to absolutely shut the borders right now. You know, absolutely shut the borders. In fact, we need to, where we can, deport people back to low-carbon countries. But no, they don't want that at all.
So mass deportations are that's a green policy.
If the Greens were actually about the environment, then yeah, they would be.
Well, that's...
I think the green energy policies in the West are, as you say, Leo, it's about power. It's not about the parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere, of which it's only like 400 odd parts per million.
Also,
so
a lot of the people that get
number.
A lot of the people that get contracts from the government and get these tax breaks to build this technology, they're friends with the people who are making the legislation in the first place. Like you only need to look at both the US and Europe to see that the people who are leading in green technology are normally pally with left-wing politicians that are pushing it. And it's and of course, making money through government contracts is one of the best ways you can make money. Look at Elon Musk.
Yeah. Well, if you look at Elon Musk, so through Tesla, through, you know, not just cars, but also the battery technology, you know, he's somebody who's really pushing forward green technology and saving the planet. And Teslas were the must-have accessory for any Hollywood celebrity. Adding one to their 20-car fleet was somehow helping the environment. But now all the lefties are saying, oh, we need to ban Elon Musk. We should stop buying Teslas because of his stuff on Twitter. And it's like, what about the environment? I thought the environment was so important. Oh, is the environment not important now because Elon Musk has been revealed not to be a fellow communist? It's an absolute nonsense.
It's like paying 20p for a carrier bag. Yeah, that will save the environment. Yeah, that makes sense. Sure. It's just nonsense, isn't it? When you look back on sort of geological timescales, we've had CO2 many times more than it is today, and the net result is not a runaway greenhouse effect.
The net result is dinosaurs.
Yeah, you get megaflora.
Fun.
You get giant lily pads.
Yeah, giant. Who doesn't want a giant?
Right, who doesn't want that?
Yeah.
With dinosaurs, it would do a lot to reduce the carbon footprint of humanity. Wouldn't it?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I think climate change is happening. And I think it's going to be, quite bad. But I think the best thing to do is work to ameliorate it rather than try to stop it by turning ourselves into Stone Age communists.
I think also, whether it's happening or not, I think the right thing to do is the same regardless, which is not needlessly punish your society with ridiculous technology that's not ready and not efficient. Yeah. I think you just need to accept that it's going to be oil and gas.
Yeah.
And I mean, the fumes from oil and gas are not ideal. They still do harm to people. However, you've got to make the cost of producing new technology as cheap as possible to be able to get it in the first place.
And the good news is, like in the West, we've pretty much decoupled our sort of economic progress from oil and gas and fossil fuel consumption. So, it used to be that they just marched step in step. If you used more energy like that, then your economy would do better. You couldn't really have one without the other. But now we've got one without the other. Now we're using much less carbon per unit of economic activity. And the great news is, solar power is really gonna. I mean, it just keeps outstripping all expectations. It's getting so cheap and it's getting so efficient. It's gonna really revolutionize energy, and I think it's going to be great for people who want to be independent from the government as well, because you won't need to be plugged into a grid.
That's
can have a
what
big battery
sort of
in your
appeals
house.
to me, is that I can generate my own electricity and not be beholden to the companies setting my rates.
Yeah.
But also, in Britain, it's a bit of a tough sell, isn't it?
But even in
Overcast,
even in Britain,
no sunshine.
even in Britain, it's going to be like solar power is becoming so cheap and so efficient that it's going to work in Britain, not just in the Sahara Desert.
Well, it's true to say the climate is changing because by its very nature it will always be in flux.
Yep.
So the idea that it could stay exactly the same as when records first started in the 19th century or 20th century, whatever it is, that's a nonsense.
Yeah.
But to think that human CO2 output is like profoundly change the planet, I don't buy that. Lots of scientists don't buy that.
Yeah.
Right? Like volcanism and the sun dictate our weather patterns far more than CO2, which again is in the hundreds of parts per million. So a tiny amount.
Just capture it and send it to Mars, and then Elon Musk can have his colony, because
Yeah.
you actually need it there.
And also, they always say, talking about when records began, they always say when there's a storm and it's linked to climate change, they're like, this is the worst storm in 200 years. This is because of climate change. It's like the worst storm in 200 years. So what was causing it 200 years ago then?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right, yeah.
200 years ago, before the automobile, like, what was what was happening then? What, dinosaurs were, like, riding their bicycles around?
There was more shamanism back then.
I always find it funny when they say it's the hottest day or the coldest day since 2019. It's like, what, like not that long ago then at all. Anyway, yeah.
So
Nonsense stuff.
on to some other nonsense. I've got a section here about woke BS that he's probably going to get rid of. There could well be an executive order that forbids federal funding going to schools or other institutions that have DEI programs. That could be quite significant. There could also be a ban for funding schools that teach critical race theory, which would be another interesting one. And something else that has been potentially suggested is a ban on transgender women from competing in women's sports, which a lot more people talk about than actually care about women's sports.
It's just common sense, right?
Of course it is, yeah.
But,
Come on.
I mean, surely, if you like betting on sports, you don't want this. I mean,
Yeah,
you want to know who's
that's
going to
true.
win.
You're not going to get good odds though, right, on the
Yeah.
dude that's doing the 400 metres with all the women. Like everyone knows, the bookies know, everyone knows. You're going to get shit odds, aren't you, basically? Anyway.
Yeah.
Some other things that are going on as well. Freeing the Jan 6 hostages.
Oh, that'd be nice. Be free as of this evening.
Potentially.
There's still quite a few in jail.
There are, yeah.
Wow.
I've spoke to a couple of them.
Man, that is such a, like, you know what I mean? For that, they locked up these people. I saw photos. They were just
Behind the
walking
ropes, yeah.
inside the ropes and stuff. And then you compare that to the BLM stuff, and some of the BLM protesters and rioters got money. They got paid compensation for being arrested. It's just so blatant. It's so two-tier. It's like something that could happen in Britain.
Yeah, that's true. So one thing I do think will happen is that he will pardon the people accused of non-violent crimes, because some of them still haven't been to trial yet. So that's worth mentioning as well, that they've been held, some of them in solitary confinement for an incredibly long amount of time without a trial, which I believe is unconstitutional
We
off the
joked
top of my
about
head.
Saudi or Chinese justice. I mean, that is terrible.
Well, they're political prisoners, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
What a bit of a shame, really, on the Dems for doing that.
Yeah.
No, I very much agree.
And also sets a precedent for, if Trump wanted to do that to any left-wing aligned protests, they've set the precedent for him to do that.
Yeah, it's worrying. Again, it's that slide, that tit-for-tat thing.
Yeah.
A slide into getting further and further away from the way the Republic was meant to function. And in the end, hopefully this isn't the case. Fingers crossed this isn't the case. But decades or maybe a century from now, you'll get a new president in, and on day one, he's just rounding up his political enemies and putting them in prison without trial for 4 years.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not that crazy of a thing.
Well, it happens in a lot of countries.
Right. You're right. Yeah, exactly.
Right, I'm going to power through a few things ever so quickly. I know you wanted to talk a little bit about the intelligence stuff, so I'll leave some time for that. But he wants to buy Greenland. I think that it's running a 600 million black hole in Denmark's pocket, and I think that there's an appetite for being separate, and I've seen opinion polls that seem favourable for Greenland going over to the US, so that might well happen. I've seen lots of signals about Ukraine willing to come to the peace agreement with Russia, and Trump has vowed to end the war within the first 6 months of assuming office.
But that's changed from day one. Trump is talking a lot more sort of hawkishly on Ukraine now. And I think Putin's, to be honest, kind of shitting himself, because you can see Trump. You can see with Gaza, with the release of the hostages and stuff. When Trump goes in to negotiate, he doesn't fuck around, and he's ready to play hardball. And I think Putin knows that, and there's not going to be any more of this. Like Biden for so long was like holding back on weapons and not letting them use HIMARS to hit strategic sites, not letting them hit sites within Russia, and always stymieing, not giving them F-16s, always holding them back, almost trying to bleed both sides, trying to bleed Ukraine, try to bleed Europe and bleed Russia as well. So all these strategic competitors would be weakened. Whereas Trump is like, Trump doesn't want to see any more lives lost. So he's like, no, we need this to end. And if it doesn't end, you're going to get hit very hard, and it'd probably be the end of Putin as well. So I think Putin's gonna. I think it's going to be bad. It's going to be a much worse deal for Putin than The Guardian told us.
I think one of Trump's greatest strengths is that he's very, very good at negotiating with foreign powers. And I think that a lot of what he's doing, and he said he would do, ties into that quite nicely, that he wants to get better deals for America. And as his background as a businessman, that sort of makes sense that he thinks in those terms. And I think that we're going to see a lot of that. Maybe he's going to be perhaps less focused on some of the domestic things that people would like to get done in the face of being a sort of world leader and being what is effectively the figurehead of the American empire.
And he's going to push Europe to be more muscular and stop pussying around and focusing on turning everyone into a transgender communist.
That'd be
instead,
nice, wouldn't it?
They're gonna say, no, you got to be militarily strong to support Ukraine and to support yourself against the threat from Russia, because we're not going to come over there and keep doing it.
It's fair enough, really. It's not on their back door, is it? So let's talk about some of the intelligence stuff to finish up. Obviously, one of the things that is going on that's sort of tied into this, that's sort of tied into the government itself being bad, is that they've got the Department of Government Efficiency, where they're cutting down all of the fat from all of these government departments, hopefully abolishing lots of them akin to, Milei's Argentina, where just entire government departments vanish, because that's my sort of ideal dream state. But as well as, getting rid of entrenched bureaucrats, I think Trump's going to pass some sort of executive order whereby it becomes easier to get rid of federal employees because they've got lots of conditions and things like that make them difficult to remove. And tied into that is all of the intelligence stuff. And of course, there's lots of documents that are potentially going to be released. The JFK, RFK and MLK, lots of K assassination documents being released.
Whether they'll actually show anything, I'm not too sure.
Mm-hmm.
I hope they do, but I suspect that real slam dunk bits of evidence have been quote unquote lost decades ago.
Mm-hmm.
But nonetheless, it'll be nice to see that. I mean, there's this idea of Trump draining the swamp, or the deep state, or a shadow government, or whatever you want to call it. That he'll actually go to war with them on some level. I mean, that would be nice. He released a video months and months ago, didn't he, with his 10-point plan, talking about how he's, and this is a quote, dismantle the deep state and reclaim our democracy from Washington corruption, and it is corruption. He wants to clean out corrupt actors in these agencies, of which there's 17 intelligence agencies in America. It's like the CIA is the tip of the iceberg, There's like the DIA, the NSA. It goes, there's many.
You'd actually struggle to remember them all in
right.
sitting, wouldn't you?
Yeah. And talk about how these agencies have been weaponized against Americans. Intelligence services that are supposed to be just about foreign powers and counter-espionage, but have been turned on the people, basically. Turned on conservatives, Christians, and the left's political enemies. He wants to stop that. A war on what he called rogue bureaucrats.
This is really important stuff as well, in my opinion. This isn't just, which bathroom are you using, which is, somewhat important, but sort of theatre in comparison to this stuff, which is the nuts and bolts of how the entire political system operates.
Yeah,
I think ever since sorry.
Well, when you've got a large government, a large state bureaucracy, it naturally drifts into authoritarianism. It makes too many rules, it applies those rules too officiously and with too much bias. So shrinking the state, and it's only done as a sort of the only possible use for having a huge state is as a sort of Keynesian stimulus to employ people who wouldn't be employed otherwise. Our economies are running pretty hot in the West, so in America and in the UK, the argument is that we need to have open borders because there's all these jobs we need to fill. No, the people who can fill those jobs are here. They're just working doing unproductive jobs for Haringey Council or wherever it is. So we need to absolutely slash the size of the state, like Milei did in Argentina, because the Peronists, the socialists in Argentina, were just creating all these state jobs as a sort of as a way to buy votes. It's it sort of rewards a block of people by giving them these cushy government salaries, and then the tacit agreement is, well, you vote for us, and we'll keep we'll keep this trough open for your snouts to go in.
I think specifically in America as well, there's been a power struggle for decades between the intelligence services and the legit government. Yeah. I think ever since Eisenhower, ever since the end of World War II, really. I mean, Eisenhower, when he left office in the very early 60s, would it have been, there's a famous video of him talking about how you need to be careful of a shadow government growing up. It's like, thanks for that, Ike. The shadow government you essentially allowed to happen. But anyway, ever since then, it's just got out of control that the intelligence services do wield more power in various senses than Congress or the president, to the point where they are sort of subverting and perverting the republic itself. Yeah. And that Trump actually says, anyway, he wants to do something about that. Yeah. And he had a 10-point plan, like reform the FISA courts. That's like foreign intelligence surveillance stuff, where the intelligence services go before a judge and say, oh, we need to wiretap XYZ, do all these sort of extra constitutional things. And the judges, the FISA court judges just say, yeah, do it. They just rubber stamp it. And he's saying that's got out of control. Yeah. That's just one tiny example. So, if he does even some of these things, it would be great. I mean, what he talks about exposing the hoaxes and abuses of power, of deep state spying, censorship and corruption, again, in the United States against United States citizens. Once again, I think the Founding Fathers would be turning in their graves. A crackdown on government leakers that collude with so-called fake news to weave false narratives and subvert our government and democracy. Yeah, great.
What, like Snowden or people like that, where they leak?
I think he's talking about
things.
probably like CNN or MSNBC, where they just say he is a stooge of Russia, or that he had some sort of sex games with prostitutes in hotels or whatever, and it's just all
Where
lies.
they invite like someone who's got intelligence as their background onto their show and use it as political capital, basically.
Yeah.
Okay, that would make sense.
You remember with the Biden laptop, like
the Hunter Biden stuff,
all these
the 50 experts,
right?
And
Yeah,
collusion between like the executive arms of the state and the Democrats, and also big tech. I mean, it's the total state. You've got these private companies that are essentially working as arms of the Democrats as well.
Well, there was the Twitter files, wasn't there, that showed that the White House was explicitly taking a role in which accounts they wanted removed, in that they were saying, we want this, and this removed, and they would just go along with it.
So actually, to take on that and spend a decent amount of political capital and time and energy on those battles, I'm there for it.
Yeah,
It's great.
yeah.
It's actually great.
It's great that it's
If
even
it
on the
happened.
agenda in the
Right.
first place. Like,
Yeah.
that's a massive step in the right direction. If he's able to do something about it, it's one of the parts of the agenda I'm sort of most skeptical he can get done.
And also if he slashes the right parts of the government, because we've seen, when the government tries to shrink in the UK, they slash the wrong parts. We've got swathes of government that can just go. I mean, look at the Arts Council, for example, which is just something that makes the arts worse. And it taxes. You've got bus drivers being taxed to pay for ballet and opera so that rich people can go and enjoy it. It's like, why don't rich people just pay more for their tickets rather than taxing working people for their hobbies? It's an absolute nonsense. And anything that the government touches, instantly becomes, infected with their biases and instantly becomes corrupted and shittier.
Give me an afternoon and I could half the spending on the government.
Yeah.
I have a long list. But yes, that's more or less what seems to be speculated as happening. Obviously, we don't know for certain, but we can go off of what Trump has said, and that's what a lot of this is based on, what he said he's going to do when he's in office. A lot of these things, he said a lot of things in the lead up to him assuming office in 2016 that didn't necessarily happen. A lot of it's dependent on the political situation, his ability to enact it, and also whether he changes his mind. Obviously, he changed his mind about the H-1B visa stuff, which I was very disappointed about. But none of these things are necessarily guarantees. But I think the fact that he's intending to enact so much on day one should be promising that he's intending to take a lot of what he said seriously. And I'm very hopeful to see what happens. And I'm also a bit worried about the fact that the regime, the political establishment, has been so welcoming towards him now. A lot of the tech sector that censored and opposed him before has now turned to his side. Is this going to be a situation where he's invited in the devil into his home and it's going to sabotage a lot of his aims? It's entirely possible, but we'll just have to wait and see.
And talking of pardons, presidential pardons, so Biden has pardoned General Milley, Fauci, members of the January 6th Congressional Committee, and the staff and police officers who testified at it. So both sides can do presidential pardons and flex their. This is one of the things that the founding fathers would have been rolling. They're doing a lot of rolling today.
Absolutely. Can I add one last quick thing
Of course.
to the list? The Podesta Clinton stuff and the Epstein list.
Epstein list.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
People are always like, oh, why is there all these like conspiracy theories about elite paedophile networks and stuff? Because there is one, and we still haven't found out who's on it. Who's on that list?
I saw a great image on Twitter where it was a small little tugboat, a decent-sized yacht, and a giant cruise ship. And it said, on the small tug, it said the P. Diddy list.
Yeah.
On the yacht, it said the Epstein list. And on the giant cruise ship, it was Clinton Podesta.
Right.
And I think Elon retweeted it saying, let's find out.
Yeah.
That would be nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I'd love it. I'd love it.
Make it happen, Trump. I know you're watching. I hope you appreciated that segment from the podcast, The Lotus Eaters. And if you want to see what else we're up to, you can always follow our series Lads Hour, where we have a bunch of fun. This time we were talking about which world leader wins in a fight. And if you want to see everything else that we're putting out, you can always follow us on Twitter. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.